We are live. Greetings, greetings, greetings.
Greetings.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Earth School Journey. We are back for another weekly um, session or class, I guess you could say. I am your host, Uni, and this is my lovely co host, Umi Steph.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back.
Yes, welcome. This is our second week doing a, new format. We are pre-recording, I guess you could say, and we will be premiering this live at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, December 17th, which is still today. But we are pre-recording so that we can be live in the comments and so that we can chat with you all and we can be present with you all and we can, just have more interaction with you all. So thank you all so much for joining us. How are you doing today, Umi?
I'm doing pretty good today. It's been
That's
a
so good.
interesting month, but we'll get to that later.
Yes, we will. It has been a very interesting month. We are deep diving into unconditional love this month. It is a very challenging topic because as we've, stated, as you stated, earlier in the month, Umi, it seems as if the world isn't like really ready to really embrace unconditional love, unfortunately, with so much going on in the world, with so much greed and people wanting control and the vainness and basically all the seven deadly sins are like
Right.
taking over the world, right? Lust, all of that stuff is just like taking over. So it's so hard. We find ourselves rather in a space where it's so hard to really embrace unconditional love because we are fighting so many forces that are against that. And
Mhm.
so, here at Earth School Journey, our mission, our goal, our objectives, our purpose for being here is really, really unconditional love. It's so funny that we're diving into this as a topic, but overall, this is really what we believe and what we're standing for. And so I love that we have been, really broaching this subject. I'm not an expert at unconditional love. I know,
Not me either. No, no, no.
I know you have shared that, this is something that we're really diving into. We're really learning to embrace this in real time. And while we have it in us, of course, but again, it's the things that are coming against us that we have to figure out how to work through, how to overcome, how to really find ourselves,
Mhm.
around more people, places, and things that embrace unconditional love. So we're gonna, dive right in, and I'm gonna pose the first question to you, Umi. How has this month of unconditional love been going for you? Have you been saying your affirmation? Have you been considering what do we have, like an affirmation as well as an intention for the
Yeah.
month? How's it been going for you?
It's been rough.
Honest.
No, it's the most honest thing that I can say is, at the beginning of the month when we started this and I set that intention to, you know, to be this unconditional love, to experience more unconditional love than I ever have before, I seem to have dived in the other direction. You know what I mean? Of feeling unloved, of feeling angry, of feeling just discontent. Like I'm not, and I'm working on it. I have definitely worked with the affirmations. I sat with the journal questions that we came up with in the beginning. I am reading right now. I'm reading Anger by Thich Nhat Hanh because that's kind of what's really coming up for me it's interesting to me that in embracing unconditional love, anger is what's surfacing. And so I am reading reading that book and trying to learn the practices so that I can start incorporating them. I have started, we had a conversation earlier in the week about some herbs and things. And so I started working with hawthorn. I'm only a couple of days into that. So I'll report next week at study hall how that's going for me, see if I have any noticeable effects. Um, but yeah, it's been rough. It has been rough. I've encountered a lot of things this month that have been really challenging relationship wise because I do feel love of the divine. I feel there are plenty of things in my life that are going well, you know, that I feel I know that spirit is present, spirit is loving on me, It's just this one little area of relationships, you know, not my marriage. My marriage is beautiful, but like my relationships with my kids, that that's really my biggest challenge right now, Um I think anybody who's in middle age, 40s, 50s, 60s who has adult children can relate. That it just gets challenging, and so that has been really it for me. And there've been ups and downs. I'm feeling better this week than I was last week. If you all remember, where I was like, I feel like I feel like I was in bed for several days, just kind of like not wanting to deal with anything and feeling sad and depressed. Um, and I think what I'm realizing in all of this, especially now reading this book, is that I really need to take care of myself better. I really need to work on me better and more often and more consistently than I have been. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm still kind of in a, I'm not stable. I'm not settled. I'm not grounded in this yet. Um, and that's it. How about you? How has this month been showing up for you? How's it been going?
It's been, as you're talking, just thinking to myself, again, even though it's, I have a different experience, when all boils down to it, it's really the same thing. Like I have to really love myself through, what I'm dealing with, and that's, I've told you I have a health issue it's been challenging to really overcome. I've talked to doctors, I've talked to herbalists, I've talked to holistic, you know what I mean? Like I've done different things, I've tried so many different things, and it's still a challenge for me to overcome it. And it's frustrating. It's very frustrating because I want to live life freely. I want to, I don't want to feel like I need to um isolate or hide or not, you know what I mean, like go around
Mhm.
because I have this issue. And it's just really been challenging and frustrating for me. And I've had to like really like love myself through this, because it's like, okay, on the one hand, I'm like, oh, I've been dealing with this for a while. And it's like, on the one hand, I'm like thinking to myself, like, have I done enough? I could like beat myself up about it. Like, have I done enough? Have I really done everything that I could do? And then it's like, if I haven't, why haven't I? What have been my blockages? What have been the things that have caused me to not really be able to overcome this? And it's just so many different things. And then dealing with it's just a lot, you know what I mean? It's just
Mhm.
a lot. And it being something that I feel like a lot of people don't understand, that you could think that it's one thing, but it could be a couple of other things. And people just don't understand, like, you know what I mean, like you just don't
Yeah.
understand. And so it makes it challenging for me, because it could be something that people look at in a shallow way, but it could be really deep, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so yeah, I've just been having to like give myself unconditional love, and really go back to the drawing board and see, like what is it, what is work, what can work, and just really love myself through all of this, and not really look for anything outside of myself. That's really been the thing, like the real key for me is like to really get go within myself, because what I've realized, to be honest with you, is that, when you are we all have healing abilities, right? Some of us heal through our art, some heal through our cooking, some heal through music, some heal through singing. You know what I mean? We all have healing abilities. It's just in how it comes out. And a lot of times, some of us have challenges, that we have to overcome so that we can help other people, overcome them. And so it could just really be hard when you know that, this is something that you obviously you have to figure out how to overcome it. You know what I mean? Like obviously. Um, but it's hard because it's like you don't really know what you've tried so many different things. You know what I mean? And so just loving myself through that and, just, like I said, kind of going back to the drawing board and really like not beating myself up about it, not beating other people because they don't understand and getting upset. And there's really like a really fine line that you have to walk when you have certain things. And I feel like this is an expression that the divine wanted to come through me for whatever reason. And as hard as it is, I've just been trying to love myself through it because I was laughing to myself as I was driving. I'm like, I know I was on the other side. Like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll be the one. Like, I'm always the one to be like, "Yeah, sure." Like, I'm like, there's this, whatever, like this thing where I'm like, I'll be brave. I'll do it. And it's like now that I'm going through it, I'm like, kind of like, what was I thinking almost? Like, who told me that this was gonna, you know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those things that's like, oh my God, like, did I really sign up for this? I really have that question because I do believe that as energy it doesn't die, it's transformed and transmuted. And so my energetic imprint in another form decided to transform and transmute into this, and it's just really been frustrating. And so I've had to walk a fine line of unconditional love for myself first and foremost, and just try to have like grace and things for other people who may not understand or who may not be as aware. And just really leaning on my affirmations and my intentions that I set, which were to immerse myself in unconditional love. And like I said, when I take my showers, I'm like, I'm just saying and speaking, unconditional love is washing over me. When I take my healing baths, I'm immersing myself in unconditional love. When I drink my water, I'm filling with unconditional love. Like I'm setting these intentions to immerse myself in unconditional love so that I can keep my frequency at a high, level so that I can work through this and overcome this. Because it can be very daunting. Like some things can just be really daunting and challenging to overcome. And so my month has really been, like I said, it's different, but it boils down to loving myself. And I've had to overcome a little bit of anger as well. Like I'm angry, like why do I have to deal with this? You know what I mean? Like of all things, like why do I have to deal with this? It's very frustrating. But it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be angry. But loving myself through that and not lashing out at myself, not beating myself up, not beating others up. And,
Mhm.
it's a very fine line. And so this has been a very interesting month because, it's something that I've dealt with for a while, but it's like, I feel like it's like screaming for, like attention and for me to like really work through this so that I can do the things that the divine has called so that I can ascend to the next level. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's been an interesting month, and I'm just really grateful that you brought this topic to this, to us so that we could bring it to the community because I really think it's something that, a lot of people may be struggling with or, working through at this time.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So
Hmm.
our next, question that we have here, that we wanted to talk about was, defending people, who we know are not behaving in integrity, who are doing things that are wrong. And, also when we get into relationships that, we know we're being abused, but we allow ourselves to stay. Um, I think that, there's definitely a lot to say, when it comes to boundaries, when it comes to unconditional love, and just understanding that we have a responsibility. Really quickly, I just want to say I have been kind of following the Diddy trial and, the whole thing with Cassie. And I feel like a lot of people have come down on her as well. And I feel like she does have some response. Like I get she's a victim for sure, but even still, like we have a level of responsibility even still. And sometimes we don't realize that we can say no, we can walk away. Sometimes we don't have the strength. But I feel like those sorts of dynamics that we see like in that kind of like relationship is very indicative of kind of like the toxic, so you know what I mean, kind of like unconditional love that is really out there, and it comes in many different forms. And families, I see it in mothers and with their children, spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends, and all of that, just cousins, whatever. And it's just so important for us to understand that I just can't get away from the quote, iron sharpens iron. You know what I mean? Like if I keep letting you be dull and do these things that are gonna hurt you, hurt me, hurt others around us, that's not being sharp. That's not being, that's not being healthy. And so, yeah, I just kind of wanted to bring that up because it's been really in the news a lot. And I've seen so many people talking about it. And I felt like it would be a good example of, like, yes, this person is a victim on one hand, but then on the other hand, maybe it took a little maturing, maybe it took some strength, maybe it took, you know what I mean? Like we all have to go through things so that we can overcome them. And it's unfortunate to see like some of the things that we've gone through and other people have gone through. But just remembering, like, I think that there's just a really fine line when it comes to like having responsibility and like kind of like being a victim. You know what I mean? Especially in the world that we live in today where there's so many resources and we have so many things available to us. What do you think, Umi? How do you feel about just kind of like that unconditional love versus toxic love situation?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like everyone has some version of this in their life. It's a level of degree, right? Um, Everyone has some, that family member, that person who they feel like they have to put up with, that never respects boundaries, or that they're too afraid to put a boundary in place with. And sometimes it's not even because of that person, it's because of another person who they love, who loves that person, and we get caught in this, dynamic of, well, I have to love them unconditionally. Well, loving someone unconditionally doesn't mean allowing them to hurt you or hurt somebody that you love or hurt anybody for that matter. Anyone at all. It doesn't necessarily have to be you or a family member, but and not defending what they're doing to outsiders. That's kind of a family thing, right? Is, oh, we don't disparage, family members in front of non-family members. To me, that's a toxic thing. That is, when I was growing up and, being abused by my parents, it was the tactic that was used to scare us into not talking about it. And I feel like that is where that was born from, is from, you know family dynamics that were dysfunctional, and parents telling children, or adults telling children, not necessarily the parent, but could have been aunt, uncle, grandparent, whatever, adults telling children, We don't talk about this outside of the family, you know? And, to an extent, I do understand that. If you're a well functioning family, then obviously you're going to have those conversations in the family, but it's a safe place to do so. When it's not a safe place to do so, then that's not appropriate. Sometimes you have to go outside and speak about these things. And so if you see someone in your family or that you love or a friend, even friends, talking bad about another friend or getting on another friend in a way that makes them uncomfortable or teasing them in a way that makes them feel bad, defending that person for doing that is, oh, that's just the way they are. They don't mean anything by it. Don't pay them any attention. That's not love. That's not loving the person who's doing the offending, and that's not loving the person who was offended. You know, and it's not loving yourself when when you're telling yourself, that's just who they are, even though it hurts. You know, and even though you may say, oh well, I really shouldn't be upset about that, or you might minimize your, the impact it's having on you. Because maybe that person said, you make a big deal out of nothing. You know, I think firm boundaries are necessary when it comes to loving anyone unconditionally or otherwise. You know, it's not unconditional, or I should say it's not conditional to have a boundary. Right? That's not a condition. I still can love you if you cross my boundaries, but I could love you over there.
Right.
I'm still loving you, and kind of the most loving thing I can do for you at this point is tell you that you can't treat me that way and still be a part of my life. So that's really, it's kind of some of the things we've talked about before, but allowing someone to hurt you is not loving them. Allowing someone, it's not loving to them. They need to know that they can't treat people that way, you know, and you let them treat you that way because, oh, I'm supposed to love them unconditionally, and then they treat someone else that way. Well, where's the unconditional love for that person?
Right.
You know. So yeah. How about you? What are your thoughts?
I think you bring up an amazing point. I think that we have to really enforce boundaries because we don't want to feel certain things. You know what I mean? Like you talk about reading Anger, the book Anger. And I feel like when people disrespect your boundaries or people disrespect you in different ways, it brings up anger, it brings up hurt, it brings up pain, it brings up, all of these feelings. And we live in a world that is kind of like trying to get us desensitized. It's trying to get our feelings kind of like muted so that we don't know kind of like what's right versus what's wrong. Like that's kind of what I feel. I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
the things that I've suffered, the, different types of abuse and like bullying and, different scenarios that I've been in, it kind of made me hardened. And the best thing I could have done was to really soften back up and be able to feel and say, hey, this isn't right for me. This doesn't feel good for me. This doesn't feel good. This isn't, you know what I mean? And this is why we have things, like cancerous cells and fibroid tumors and things of that nature that harden in our bodies because we are not freely flowing with our emotions and feelings. We are being taught to harden so that we don't feel while we're getting abused. And no, that's not unconditional love. It's going in the opposite direction of everything that is oneness, everything that is love, everything that we have come here to feel, which is to get back connected to that source and get back connected to each other. These systems are making us more and more separated.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really feel that, what you touched on there when you're talking about, just really, we need to feel. It's okay to feel, it's okay to say, hey, that hurt. And it doesn't just have to be when I touch the stove. You know what I mean? It doesn't just have to be when I, fall down the stairs or something. Yeah, no, things people say and do hurt us. And what it's doing is it's cutting off our creativity. It's cutting off again, our oneness. It's cutting off our ascension, as human beings. I mean, listen, they say that we used to teleport. We used to be able to, we had telepathy, telepathic abilities. There's so many abilities that I truly believe our ancestors had that we don't have now because we are being hardened,
Right.
because we are being made heavy and we're weighed down. Our hearts and are not as light as the feather, which is really our goal. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And so we have to make sure that we are holding each other accountable and we are letting each other know when we say and do certain things, it is not just bringing you think that, oh, you're just bringing this person down. No, you're bringing yourself down. One of the things that I remember when the whole like petty thing came out, like, oh, people would say, oh, I'm petty, I don't care, I'll do this, I'm petty. I always hated that. And I didn't know why. I didn't know I hated that until I found out what, I was like, let me look up what the word petty means. It means low ranking. It means to be beneath. It means to be, not in high stature or regard. And so I think that we have to remember that when we, speak in certain ways and do certain things, we allow each other to mistreat each other. We're not holding each other accountable. Like you said, if there's usually there's a like you said, there's like a main person, and then there's like a person who supports the kind of bullying, and then it goes and they bully a third party
Right.
together. You know what I mean? I've been in that scenario so many times in my life, and it's just amazing because I'm like, this isn't how we're supposed to be. Like, this isn't how we're supposed to treat each other. We're supposed to be kind to one another. We're supposed to uplift each other. I don't know where this mindset comes from, putting each other down. I
Right.
remember putting on social media one day that, there are, roasting sessions and sessions where, people crack on each other. And it's like, well, where are the hype sessions? Where are the praise sessions? Where are the uplifting sessions? Where is that? Why
Hmm.
don't we have that? Why isn't that a thing? And so I think that, when it comes to just making sure that we are doing the right thing, we also have a responsibility to make sure that the people that we are around are also doing the right thing, not only to us, but to everyone around us, really. We gotta care. We gotta care about each other.
Yeah. Just before you go on to the next topic or the next question, what I was thinking of when you were saying that is, I know that you mentioned maybe last week or the week before, I don't remember, about how entities can get attached to a person. And as I've been reading this book, he was talking about how like a parent transmits their anger to their children, and any dysfunction really, but this book is specifically about anger. And and then they may pass it on to their children or their siblings or other people at work or whomever as they grow. And really, what a boundary is not allowing yourself to be tainted by that, is not allowing that entity to transmit to you, whatever that is. And literally just came to me as you were talking, I was like, ah, yeah, I see that. It's like that boundary, it's protecting you from allowing that to transmit and enter into your consciousness, into your body, into your, so that it can harden and become disease, so that it can become dysfunction and a practiced, a learned thing that you're constantly operating out of, instead of operating out of your true essence. So I just wanted to share that because that was coming to me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Like, honestly, it's as you were talking, that's what came to me. And so for you to be able to affirm that and
Yeah.
understand, I really appreciate that so much, and it's definitely something that I've been really working on because I've had a hard time, kind of with boundaries and things of that nature. And like I said, in previous classes, feeling like, standing up for myself, it only got me more harm. You know what I mean? And so as I'm older now and wiser, I don't have to stay in those sorts of
Mhm.
situations, and and have that energy transmitted to me. So yeah, thank you so much for clarifying that. Would you like to speak on the next or would you like to bring up the next one? I think this is something that you added in, so I'd love for you to kind of like put it in your words if you don't mind.
Yes. So this came out of us talking about, I guess, being non-reactive in and being kind of like rooted in the presence of spirit, and that kind of being where you need to be in order to deal with the situation in which you're not being loved, right? How to be
Mm,
unconditional love when you're not being loved. And I've I talk about it a lot. I'm sure I've mentioned it. We've been doing this for almost 6 months. I think this is our 25th episode this week. So yeah, at least six, like almost 6 months. And I talk a lot about how I don't want to be reactive. I don't want to yell. I don't want to scream. I don't want, and it's not just about not wanting to yell and scream and hurt the other person, although that is true. But I don't want my nervous system to react that way. I want to have peace in my body when someone offends me. You know, yes, anger can arise, right? And you can feel it, and it really has a purpose of alerting you that something is not right. You need to take some kind of action. But does it have to get to the point of you being so anxious or so angry or so activated that you're triggered into a non-loving response?
mm,
And that's really what that's what this was about. It's really about my own personal internal unmovable peace,
mm-hmm.
right? If you're grounded in that, which I'm not, I'm not. I'm so not. Like it's something I strive for and I want, but I'm gonna be real with y'all. Even though I know that like this is the way, right? I am movable. I am not so rooted in my internal peace that someone offending me doesn't take me out of my element. It does.
Right,
It still does. And I don't want it to. I want to be so rooted in my oneness with God and my rooted in my peace, my internal peace, in my knowing that like this person has no power or control over me and that I don't have to have a nasty negative response. I don't have to cuss out everybody who cusses me out. Sometimes
right,
you could just walk away and say, I'm not dealing with this. This is not for me. But to be able to walk away and literally and physically feel okay, to feel released, to feel free, to feel, calm and peaceful in your nervous system, to not do that and then be like, oh my God, like what's going to happen now? Or maybe I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't, this person's going to be mad or whatever, or, whatever that internal reaction is. For me, when I describe my nervous system being like frazzled, it's a feeling like, like you feel it in your body, like, and you just want to tense up, right? And I feel like unconditional love is not having that reaction but still holding your ground. You know what I mean? Holding your ground. You can't treat me that way. But I would really love to be able to get to a point where my physical nervous system, my body did not respond in such a way that I felt like I have to. If I don't speak up, I'm going to feel like this forever. Right? Because the reality is you might feel better for a minute, but then later you don't really, you still don't feel well because all you really did was make that other person double down on whatever it was they were doing. You know what I mean? You make them more angry. Either that or they, and there are instances where they go in the other direction and now they're afraid of you and they don't want to talk to you, or, whatever the case may be. Um, but I just feel like for me, being unconditionally loving involves being so rooted and grounded in my own love of self and my connection with the divine, and knowing that the divine is unconditionally loving me and caring for me and that nothing can hurt me, that I don't have to have this crazy reaction, this, over the top reaction. I don't have to rage. I don't have to, or go in the other direction where I get depressed and sad and I don't want to talk to anybody. I keep talking in terms of anger, but really sometimes it goes the other way where you're just like, I don't want to deal with life or people or worlds, or this is all terrible. And I'm still not in my peace. I'm still not in my wholeness. I'm still not in my oneness. And that was really, kind of the point I wanted to make in this particular, spot right here, was just, yeah, it's really this idea of being internally rooted. And kind of when we get into the next question, and we talk a little more about anger, I'll kind of elaborate a little more as to why I feel that way. But yeah, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
I think that was absolutely perfect. I've definitely experienced both ends of the spectrum where I have, been reactive. I have experienced, pushing things down and, getting sad and depressed and then getting reactive
Right.
at some point, you know what I mean? Because it's got to come out at some
Right.
point. Either it's going to harden and become dis-ease, or it's going to come out, you know what I mean? And the one thing that you want to do is, again, if you can avoid it from crossing your boundaries, think of it as like your energetic auric field is like there's like a gate around it. There's a fence. It's our job to protect
Hmm.
our auric in our energetic field. It's our job to make sure that, you know, um, dis-ease and lower vibrational frequencies don't get to us. It's like being able to stand on your porch and see, oh, there's a raccoon over there, there's a snake over there, there's, you know what I mean, there's a
Right.
bear out there. For some things you may need a trap, for some things you may need to plant some herbs that'll keep them away. But we are in charge of our energetic field, and making sure that we're doing our best to protect ourselves will help us so that we are not, like you said, going in either direction. This is something that I've had to, live through to experience. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh, I didn't like when I was reactive. I didn't like when I didn't speak up for myself. You know what I mean? So, how do I figure out a way to kind of like bring those two, bring myself into balance? And so, I am able to, recognize what's right for me. And one of the things, like we said, I had to pour love into myself. I had to love myself unconditionally. I had to get myself to a certain level where I know what I like, what I don't like, what I like to feel, what I don't like to feel, what I like to remember, the things that I want to, consider and remember and ruminate on. And, I don't want to ruminate on my friend, speaking badly to me. And so how do I do that? I
Right.
stop them at the gate. Like, no, this
Yeah.
isn't going to happen here. You know what I mean? This is how I protect myself. And, I think that it's something that not a lot of people are taught, unfortunately. We have to learn the hard way. And so, I'm just really glad to be able to share, some of these lessons that I've learned and the lessons that you've learned here on our Earth School journey, so that maybe we can help others to, if nothing else, to not continue to, travel down this path, and also maybe to help, those that are coming in future generations. So, yeah, thank you. And so our next conversation topic or question that we have is, can anger and love coexist?
Mm.
Can love and fear coexist?
Hmm.
Is there a difference between acting from anger or rage and acting on anger's prompt that something isn't right? And I'll
Hmm.
stop right there and I'll
Yeah. Right. I this is it's a really hard question to answer because can anger and love coexist? I want to say they can, but I'm not sure that they can. It's like I don't know because if you are um I guess it can because you can anger someone unintentionally. You can have the best of care and still make someone angry. And you may not know why. It could be something that's a trigger from like past relationship, past event, or something like that, traumatic experience, and they become angered over something completely innocent. And, you know, if that person handles it well, then that is unconditional love. But if they don't, then that's not. So I don't know, can they coexist? I do feel like though, like the kind of the second part of this question with the difference between acting from anger and rage or acting on anger's prompt. And this is kind of where I was going with the, you know, being peaceful on the inside because acting out in rage is not unconditional love.
right.
Rage is uncontrolled anger. It's just you just go you're trying to hurt. And anytime you are trying to hurt as bad as you've been hurt, you are not loving unconditionally, you know? Guilty. Gonna be the first one to say, been there, done that, probably still do. I don't, it's a hard thing to admit. Like nobody wants to admit that they have these moments of being not loving. But when you're hurt and that little inner child that's hurt is activated and they don't know how to regulate their emotions, then that rage is activated. And what it is I feel like we have to teach our inner child to be non-reactive. And when I say non-reactive, I don't want anybody to get the idea of like someone does something to you and then you just be quiet about it. Like that's not what non-reactive is. Non-reactive is I don't go from 0 to 100. You offended me and now I'm jumping down your throat. Not necessarily. You have to respond because if you don't respond, you're not unconditionally loving the self, right? And so that's acting on anger's prompt that something isn't right. Anger is really there to show us, eh, something's off, something's not right. It's these emotions. Anger itself, I don't feel like is unloving. I think anger, it's ourselves, telling ourselves like, hey, it's our nervous system saying something's off. You need to fix something. Something's not right. And we are quick to say it's the other person when sometimes it's something in us. That's where I was going before when I was saying sometimes someone can anger you or you can anger someone and they're like, I didn't even do anything. Like, why are they so mad? You know? So anger has a purpose and I think it needs to be explored and it needs to be treated with care and understood. And you need to respond from that place, not from rage, not from I need to get them back or revenge or hurt or that's I don't think rage and I really feel strongly that rage and love cannot coexist. That's just not loving. And that but anger itself, I kind of want to say that anger and love can coexist if it's used properly, if it's taken for the gift that it is, this gift of, divine awareness in the body saying, something's off. You need to fix this. You need to work on this. Um, yeah, that's kind of how I feel about that. How about you? What are you thinking?
I agree. I think that anger and love go hand in hand. I think that anger, like you said, is saying something's not right. I have an unmet need. I'm being, I'm vulnerable in some way. I'm not being loved. I think anger is really showing us that there's some unmet need of love, but we know that love is there. You know what I mean? So it's like
Right.
there's some like this doesn't feel right. You know what I mean? And so I think anger, because there's different, like you said, there's different emotions. You got sadness, you have anger, you have rage, you have disappointment. We can go around that feelings wheel, which I have found to be extremely helpful with, identifying, exactly what it is that I'm feeling. Let me name what this is. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so when it comes to anger, I feel like anger and love definitely go hand in hand because it's basically saying I'm not feeling love, but I know that I should. There's something going on where there's a need not being met. And I know that I deserve to have that need met. And so I'm willing to fight for it. And sometimes you do have to fight. You know, it's so funny because as we were talking, throughout this month, and I've been having different revelations as I'm driving and as I'm like sitting having tea and as I'm at work and just different things. And I realized that I hate fighting. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I do not like to fight. And, like I told you, I think it's, from, my upbringing and, watching my mom, go through domestic violence and unfortunately losing her life, God rest her soul. I think that, fighting and showing anger, it scares me. You know what I mean? And so I would always suppress my anger um, because I was scared of like what would happen. You know what I mean? But I feel like when I was not honoring the anger that I felt, that I wasn't necessarily showing myself unconditional love. I wasn't showing myself the love that I deserved. And so when I started to get angry again, I'm not gonna lie, like I started to feel a little bit better because I knew that this isn't right. You know what I mean? Like I'm getting off of, the victim frequency where it's okay to stomp me and kick me and treat me bad. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna stand up and I'm gonna fight because I love myself. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And so that's how I feel like anger kind of goes hand in hand, and I think that it's a healthy emotion to have, as a parent. I've definitely had to, show my anger and, making sure that my daughter was treated properly in different scenarios, and letting people know that, hey, if this is a situation where, she can't speak up for herself, I'm here to reinforce that because,
Hmm.
I love her and it's okay. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I feel like it's okay to love and be angry, you know what I mean? But
Hmm.
it's what you do with that anger that makes the difference. Like you said, that's where the line between unconditional love or just love in general comes into play. Are you going to act out of love, or are you going to act out of fear? And one of the things I did want to bring up really quickly, I feel like we live in a world where, because so many like psychology has been studied and things of that nature, I feel like we live in a world where a lot of people try to test people's anger, right? We try to push people's buttons and test people's anger. And I just want to say that I really think that that is of a very low frequency. And I think that it is what it does is it shortens the length of the relationship because
Hmm.
what is you're gonna see how people behave in different scenarios. Let life show you how people are. Don't pretend to be God and try to push people's
Right.
buttons and see who
Yeah.
people are because you feel afraid, because you don't know, because you're scared. Don't do that to people. You
Right.
understand? What you're doing is you're adding on to their load, and guess what? You're adding on to your load as well, because
Right.
you could have had someone who may have, stayed in your life longer. Maybe that button that you pushed was a sensitive button, and now their boundaries or their anger is like, this is a threat. I need to be away from this person. But
Right.
maybe the Most High put them in your life for a reason. So
Mm-hmm.
I want people to stop trying to play God and, testing people's buttons and seeing, you want to see people get angry and all of that.
Yeah.
That is the lowest of the low.
I just want to say in response to that, I there is it social media has a lot to do with this, with the whole prank thing, and now
Mm,
I've seen it with my kids, my younger kids. No, with all of my kids. Now I can't even just say the young ones. Rage baiting. It's what it's called. It's called rage baiting. And they do it on
mm,
social media and they laugh and giggle. Hee hee hee. We made that person blow up. Rage baiting is not love. There's no love in that. It's not funny. It's not okay. I hate prank videos, period. But when you rage, like the rage baiting is like picking at someone about something that sets them off, you know, and then they lose it and then you laugh at them for it, you know, and just it's so much wrong with that. And so I'm glad that you mentioned it because that's a trend I want to see end. Our children do not need to learn that. It's not loving, it's not kind, it's not caring. You wouldn't want someone to do it to you. You're not going to he laugh when they do it to you, so don't do it to other people. But yeah, I had to say that. I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but like I have seen that trend on social media, and I've seen my kids do it to each other. Mm-mm. It's never fun. It's never fun as the parent in the room who has to go to the older kid when the younger kid's doing it. They're just rage baiting you, right? Like let it go. I'm not letting it go. And it's like, okay, calm down. And then you have to be in the middle. It creates a completely like uncomfortable and tense environment for everyone. So like, let's quit with the rage baiting. That's just it's too much. So yeah, I just had to
yeah.
add that.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I just want to say really quickly to add on to that, it's where you're taking someone into that darkness and those, like, that's just like, why do we want to take each other there? Why don't we want to take each other up in love and care and kindness? Again, like I said earlier, why do we want to bring each other down to these lower vibrational frequencies instead of lifting each other up? What is this about? Why are
Hmm.
we doing this to each other? I've been through that a lot myself, and it's not fair, it's not fun,
Hmm.
and it's
No,
disgusting.
it is. It is. I think the thing I hate to hear the most when somebody offends me and I say something to them is, "It was just a joke." It's not funny. A
It
joke is
ain't that
something
much.
people laugh at. If I'm not
Hmm.
laughing, it's not funny.
A,
Yeah.
a joke should not harm people,
No.
it
Right.
shouldn't. All right, so we're winding down. I mean, I don't know if we want to just answer maybe one more. We only have a few more minutes. What do you think, Umi?
I guess we got about 7 minutes. We can try.
7 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think this is, if I had to choose one out of our last three answer or questions that we have, I think the next one is really necessary. What role does forgiveness play in unconditional love?
Wow. Yeah. That one is it's one I don't like to deal with. I don't. I'm gonna be honest, because I I have had this experience of having to forgive the same person multiple times, right? And I do feel that forgiveness is key to unconditional love, right? And we have to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean access, you know? If that person hasn't evolved and changed from the situation, then they don't need access. Again, this is that boundary of you're not going to contaminate me with that dark entity that's attached to you, right? That dark spirit, that whatever, that generational curse that you're trying to pass on. Yeah, I don't want it.
No,
Okay.
thank you.
But forgiveness, I feel like, is necessary in the sense that one, it releases you, right? It releases the self, it releases us from harboring negative feelings and emotions. It brings us into compassion. So and some of the most transformative practices I've done are forgiveness practices. I find that I have to do them often and repetitively for the same situation, because it'll come up again, it'll come up again, it'll come up again, it'll come up again, and you'll have to do it all over again. Though each time you do it, it may get easier, or you may come to a resolution faster. I've also seen, you know, like the practice of Ho'oponopono, which is a forgiveness practice, um, change relationships, just completely change relationships. Uh, it can be a very transformative thing. You got to have dedication. You got to keep working at it. It's hard. It's hard. Everyone's it's simple. Yes, it is simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Forgiveness practices are hard, but I do think that they are necessary because they help us to where a groove has been created of reacting a certain way towards a certain person or a certain, experience or whatever. That forgiveness allows us to kind of fill that groove so that we are not, always reacting out of that same way all the time. It takes the power out of it. It takes the power out of it so it doesn't have control over you anymore. So that's what I have to say about forgiveness. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I completely agree with you, and I love that you spoke about it taking the power away. I when I think about some of the things that, come up in my mind that I have to constantly forgive and forgive, what I realize is that another emotion, bitterness,
Mhm.
is very, very sneaky. Like bitterness will creep
Yeah.
in. You know what I mean? When you lack forgiveness and when you are bitter, you just can't see the good in anything or very little. Your view is so limited.
Hmm.
It's like like we can see, the sun, the sky. It's like it goes like when you're bitter, your view goes like this, like so limited. You know what I mean? And so I think that forgiveness really helps us to have unconditional love for ourselves. And it helps us to not become bitter.
Hmm.
When you have these things that are constantly coming up and, you're constantly thinking about them. And I know for me, like, I may not retaliate outwardly towards a lot of people, especially now, that I'm older. I just, I want to be more mature and wiser. I don't want to act out. Maybe when I was younger, I'd pop off a little bit and do all of this and be ready to argue and, sometimes fight. Not always, but if I felt pushed to that level. But it's like even now, like I've had to be real with myself about the thoughts that I've had and, wanting people to experience the pain that they've caused me and putting energy out there towards that. And it's like, you know what? I got better and bigger fish to fry. I got bigger
Right.
things and better things to do than worry about, what this person did to me while maybe I wasn't as conscious of my boundaries. I wasn't as strong and, I wasn't as, what I mean, good with putting my boundaries into play. And so it's like, you know what, I can let that go. I can forgive it. Forgive myself for not knowing better. Forgive them because whatever they got going on is that's their stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't need that in my auric field and in my mind and going on continuing on in my energy. And that's really what forgiveness does for me. It really helps me to not become bitter, which is my goal. I never want to be a bitter woman. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
never want to be a bitter woman. I just feel like I've seen what bitterness can do, and I just don't want to go down that road. And so forgiveness is really important for me for that. And that's kind of one of the ways I love myself unconditionally. It's like
Mm,
I want to stay open. I want to still believe in the goodness, and I want to believe that life is going to just continue to get better, you know?
yeah,
So,
yeah. I'm glad you mentioned bitterness. I'm a projector, so that's our not self.
ooh,
Bitterness and resentment.
ooh.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So you just reminded me of that. But yeah, we're at the end of the hour, so I'll let you wrap up.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been an amazing, another amazing conversation. We've really been diving into unconditional love and, really thinking about, how can we stay free? Like that's really the goal, is to stay free. When you have all of these things weighing you down, unforgiveness, hurt, and pain, and, just ruminating again on the things that you've been through in life, it really keeps you stuck. It keeps you weighed down.
Right.
And we've got so many places to go, so many things to accomplish, so many things to create. We've got things that we can do. And if we stay stuck in, these things, we are not moving forward. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I just want to thank you, Umi. Do you have any final words on unconditional love?
Mm. No, I don't really have anything um to say except join us next week because we'll be doing our study hall on unconditional love, and we're gonna talk about some practices and some herbs and some real practical ways of implementing unconditional love, and it's going to be a really great conversation. We'll see you then. That's it.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us again.
Yes.
We are live in the comments while this is airing live. So, maybe you can share your experiences with unconditional love. How do you feel about unconditional love? Have you watched our, previous episodes that we've had this month on unconditional love? Have you been following along? Have you answered any of the journal prompts? We'd really love to interact with you in the comments. This is why well, one of the reasons why we're pre-recording, so that we can be present with you all and we can share and really interact and really build this community. We want to thank you so much for joining us here on Earth School Journey. Another Wednesday. We are, really excited. This is like our 6 month anniversary. Like, I'm so
Yeah.
excited. And we'll be back again, like Umi Steph said, we'll be back next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Study Hall. And then the last Wednesday of the month, on New Year's Eve, we'll be doing a year-end review. We'll be going, through and just talking about some of the topics, our growth, and we're really looking forward to that. So thank you all so much, and we will see you all in the comments.
Yes.
Peace.
Peace.